If your life doesn't align with the disciples in the Bible, are you really going to make it to heaven? Why are you so sure? For the last 3 years, I have been passionately pursuing a roster spot on the Green Bay Packers. After establishing a relationship with the president of the team, I figured my chances of making it were at 100%. I've spent the last 3 years training 3 times a day, eating 6 meals a day, and sending multiple emails to the president. I even met with the president about 6 or 7 times. Although I was 100% convinced that I would make the team, none of the coaches or current players seemed to be convinced. As many of you know, the reality is that I had gotten really close, but never made the team. What's interesting is, besides my belief, there was not a lot of actual evidence to guarantee my spot. I was 27 years old, hadn't played football in 4 years, and didn't have any film of me playing in college. And yet, despite all of these things, I was 100% convinced that I would make it. But before you start to laugh at me, let's talk about you. As Christians, we are so convinced that we are going to heaven, but what actual evidence do we have to support this belief? Recently, I heard a man say that he is 100% convinced of his salvation, yet in the same conversation, he said that he hasn't done much for Jesus. But we see the disciples in the Bible leave jobs, put family to the side, and get persecuted for their love and devotion to Christ. In Matthew chapter 19 verse 27, Peter says to Jesus, "Look, we have given up everything and followed you, becoming your disciples and accepting you as teacher and Lord. What then will there be for us?" In Hebrews, Paul talks more about the type of persecution that the disciples and other followers of Jesus experienced because of their love and devotion to Jesus Christ. He says, "But remember the earlier days, when, after being spiritually enlightened, you patiently endured a great conflict of sufferings, sometimes by being made a spectacle, publicly exposed to insults and distress, and sometimes by becoming companions with those who were so treated. For you showed sympathy and deep concern for those who were imprisoned, and you joyfully accepted the unjust seizure of your belongings and the confiscation of your property, conscious of the fact that you have a better possession and a lasting one prepared for you in heaven." We also see in the Bible that it's impossible to be a disciple unless we put God above everything. Luke chapter 14 says, "If anyone comes to me, and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life in the sense of indifference to or relative disregard for them in comparison with his attitude toward God, he cannot be my disciple." Also, we see Jesus saying that there are only a few people going to heaven. In Matthew chapter 7 he says, "But small is the gate and narrow and difficult to travel is the path that leads the way to everlasting life, and there are few who find it." The Bible actually says that even the people who are going to heaven barely make it. Peter chapter 4 verse 18 says, "And if the righteous are barely saved, what will become of the godless and wicked?" Given all this information, what evidence do we have to support our claim of being 100% saved? Earlier, I stated that I was going to join the Packers, and I'm sure many of you thought this conclusion was delusional, because of my age and my lack of history playing football. To be completely honest, I agree with you. If I wasn't being led by God, it would be very delusional. So that brings me to the question of the day. If you are sure of your salvation, but your life doesn't align with the disciples of the Bible, are you delusional? And one last thought. If your life doesn't align with the men of faith in the Bible, and yet, you're so sure of your salvation, you might have to ask yourself, who is the one telling me not to worry about my salvation?